Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney, and I host this live weekly talk radio show and this live video broadcast every Tuesday night from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I have guests who discuss some of the most novel and challenging and complex issues that employers and business owners are facing today during these trying times. And in that spirit of our show and what we tend to discuss, I'd like to welcome to our show tonight Ms. Vilma Brager. She's the co-founder and managing partner of Insight HR Consulting. Vilma, welcome to the show.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Glad to have you on the show tonight. I think we have an interesting topic that it's important, and people might feel a little stressed when they hear the R word. I'll get to that in a moment, but I think that part of our show can help people to prepare and make sure they make decisions with regard to their employees that will hopefully serve them well. So it's good to have you on the show to share your insights and your valuable tips with us tonight.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here and happy to share anything I have available, best practices and recommendations. Absolutely.
Wonderful, Vilma. Excellent. So let me elaborate for our audience tonight, our listeners, about the topic. Our topic is helping employers prepare for recession. That's the R word. There's evidence that a recession might be looming in the not too distant future, folks. And as employers and business owners, I know it's tough. The specter of lost profits and reduced spending by clients or customers, it can really create a need for layoffs, for reductions in force, and for restructuring of the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so the questions that Vilma and I want to address are, what are the HR issues and the legal liabilities and the financial factors as well, that go into the decision of whom to lay off and when to do so? And what are some best practices for preparing employees for looming layoffs from an HR perspective? And how should employers determine which workers will make the cut? So on tonight's episode, Vilma and I will be discussing how you, the business owner or the employer, can best prepare for a possible recession. And before getting into our questions and conversation, I wanted to share with our audience tonight a little bit more about Vilma. You can get a sense of who she is and what she does. She really has quite an interesting background. So our guest tonight on Employment Law Today is Vilma Brager, the co-founder of Insight HR Consulting, who serves as managing principal. Now, Vilma offers her client partners, over 20 years of human resource management and operations experience, including key HR leadership roles within a variety of industries and company sizes. As an ASHRM and HRCI certified HR professional, Vilma keeps her client partners in compliance and provides key insights into HR regulations, laws, and best practices. Now, prior to becoming an HR professional, Vilma began her career in operations, where she held leadership roles within large multinational companies. This operational and business acumen has brought great value to Vilma's client partners, especially when consulting and advising business owners on HR matters such as compliance, employee relations, it's a big one, benefits, training, recruitment, talent management, leadership, and organizational development. And in addition to her role at Insight HR Consulting, Vilma has served on the board of directors for the Inland Empire Society of Human Resource Management. That's SHRM once again. Currently, Vilma is the president of the Inland Empire SHRM chapter in Southern California. She is also an ambassador for the National Latina Businesswomen Association, Inland Empire. She holds a bachelor's degree in organizational development from the University of Laverne, and she is a certified HR professional through SHRM, aka SHRM, and HRCI. Vilma enjoys spending time with her husband, daughter, and 2 furry pups. Her hobbies include reading books and learning to cook healthy recipes to share with family and friends. Wow, Vilma, really have an interesting and diverse background there, I must say.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. There is a lot of years, not only in HR, but in the operational world too. And if you add them all together, it's more than 20 years. But
yes,
we'll take it with 20.
Okay, I understand. I know what you mean. Those years tend to, when I discuss my background and tell people I've been practicing law for 23 plus years, it doesn't even sound real. So I understand how
Yes.
quick that time goes by. And I want to hear a little even more about yourself. One of my standard questions to my guests is, if you can tell us, like, how did your career initially start out, and what prompted you, Vilma, to co-found Insight HR Consulting? Background.
Oh, absolutely love to share information and definitely share a little bit of the background. So
Sure.
Initially, the operational positions that I held really back in the days, and I'm going to age myself, so 20 years plus ago, a lot of the leadership used to do quite a lot of what HR does today, right? So they did a lot of the employee investigations, the training, leadership development, hiring, separating, you name it.
Yeah.
And part of that, what I truly enjoyed was really developing my team. And the leadership opportunity to develop your team was a huge focus for me to move into the HR field. I was very fortunate enough to work for a very large organization back in the day, where I did have the opportunity to transition from the operational world with that company to the HR world. And so I started as a recruiter, which when I was a leader, I had to recruit my staff. And so making that transition from that and dedicating that time just for recruiting was amazing for me. It kind of translated a little bit of what I was doing and brought in the operational perspective in the HR world. When you go out recruiting, wonderful, but what makes a great fit between a candidate and a company? How can that two different roles marry and be happy for a while, right? So I thought my operational background brought that in, the reality of what we do every day within that company, and be able to talk through all the candidates, what is the company all about? But in essence, what do we do, and what do our staff members do for us? So needless to say, that's how I started my career in the human resources field. And within the HR, I've done just about every function within HR. So I'm a true generalist. I have experience in the benefits department, in the compensation department, recruiting, talent acquisition, leadership development, employee relations, you name it. I pretty much have experienced quite a lot of that. And so that brought me into human resources. So a career where I really didn't expect to be this long, to be truly honest. But now it is something that I love. I really enjoy the aspect of human resources as a whole. Being a true generalist, there's never been a dull moment in my career. And I've always been a learner. I love to learn new things all the time. I am not one to say I know everything. As a matter of fact, I don't, but I am very resourceful. And so that has really opened up a lot of doors for me, where I have been able to learn, and that learning and experience has been providing, great recommendation and suggestions to many different types of companies. Now, why did I start Insight HR Consulting? Well, the pandemic, to be really honest.
Sure.
So in the last 2.5 years, the first year of COVID, I was doing quite a lot of pro bono training and informational presentations, primarily to business owners, mid-sized to smaller companies. I was fortunate enough to partner with the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, when COVID first started. And they really needed guidance, not only on the COVID piece of it, right? Keeping up with all the changes, but also the employee piece, right? I think COVID brought forward human resources being a major focus on how companies do business.
Yes.
And so not knowing how to talk to the employees, what to talk to them about, and obviously meeting the regulations with COVID gave me the opportunity to introduce human resources to quite a lot of businesses, at least in the Southern California. The first time we met virtually, over 500 attendees, and the focus was all about what is COVID and what is human resources, and how do we relate both of them in what we do every single day. So COVID really was the reason why I started thinking of doing this on my own. Because they really want, there are quite a lot of companies that may offer some form of HR consulting or HR support, but they needed more than just a phone call or a virtual meeting, right? They needed somebody to be really there, understand their business, and guide them and recommend what is applicable to their situation. And so I would say a year and a half or so, I was contacted quite often. and asked, why don't you do this? I only need human resources. I really just need that type of guidance. And I was not ready at that time.
Yeah.
Needless to say that those kind of questions and inquiries came through for a long period of time. And I decided, why not? You know, I'm already helping, not even financially. I was just helping them because I really want business to be successful. I want business owners to have resources that are really there to understand what they go through, but also somebody or someone or a service provider that can really tell them, hey, listen, if you go this route, you probably need to call Eric for employment law. Or if you don't, this would be the best approach. And this is what other things are happening within your industry or your area, right? And so they needed that personalized service. And so that really is the reason why I determined, you know, I should do this. I really should. I'm very passionate about businesses. I want them to be successful. I really truly believe a partnership between employees and the company and their executive leadership can be had. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. And so, you know, the approach to our services to businesses is we'll come up with solutions for you. We're not a cookie cutter type of service provider. We want to hear what are some of the pains, some of the issues that you're seeing, and for them wanting to, you know, do things differently is a big positive step, right? So having that solution driven and, you know, focus with all of our insight consulting partners has been very successful approach to many companies. And we are based in California, and as you know, California can be a little bit hard to understand some labor laws. And so you're in the East Coast. We have like 17 different types of industry here in California. And we're very proud that we definitely have enough knowledge and background to be able to support all industries and all sizes.
You know, I must say, yes, California and New York also very much a lot of different new employment laws that people must follow, HR practices, especially in New York City, a subset within New York. But wow, Vilma, I have to say, you know, you used a very passionate. And when you were speaking about your background, what brought you here, all I kept thinking was, we can clearly hear your knowledge for and knowledge of and passion for HR consulting, right? And your passion for small businesses, for business owners, you know, for the employer, say, to marry with the candidate, as you described, the use of operations in there as well, and how that background led you to your company. And then, of course, you know, hearing about the pandemic as sort of the catalyst, right, for your bold new venture. I like hearing those silver lining stories from COVID where something good came out of a rough situation. And I want to hear more about that and more about what you do. But before we get into the next question, believe it or not, we're actually at our first commercial break. Time flies when you're having fun. I'd rather take it a minute early now than start a new question and have to, you know, cut it off. So until the break. So I'll just let our audience know that you're listening to or watching Employment Law Today. As you can tell, we have a very passionate, knowledgeable guest tonight, Vilma Brager of Insight HR Consulting. Stick around, folks. On Talk Radio NYC, we'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm joined tonight. We have on our show our guest, Vilma Brager of Insight HR Consulting. And as you've heard from the introduction and the first question, that Vilma has a very extensive knowledge of and passion for HR in all facets, in all aspects of recruiting and leadership and employee relations. So I think she's an excellent guest for our topic tonight, which is the topic of helping employers prepare for recession. So Vilma, brings my next question for you, sort of more pointed on topic, which is, when might an employer know that it's time to make large-scale cuts to their workforce? And what kind of internal financial data should they be reviewing and deciding if layoffs and RIFs are necessary?
That is a great question, Eric. Well, hopefully it's not the first question that an employer should have.
True.
Right? That should be the last question once you exhaust every other venue to ensure that that is the last resource, right? That you have to move forward with a layoff. So generally, I tend to ask quite a lot of questions when somebody's asking us, hey, I think we're going to need to do a layoff. What do you recommend? Well, we definitely, first of all, as a company, and again, I help quite a lot of mid-sized employers where they may have an HR presence, maybe not as experienced or somewhat limitations within the department. But every time I get a question like this, I do want to ask about operational situations, right? Like, as a company, are you ensuring you're attaining all your revenue? You're tracking every single penny that you should be getting paid for? How about where your expenses are, right? Where are they going to? Are they essential? Is there any opportunities to cut them down, right? A bit. Are there other opportunities where you can reduce your expenses? And labor, we know labor is a huge expense on your bottom line. We know that, right? But before having a layoff, you've got to exhaust every other type of question and opportunity to ensure that that is the last, thing to do. That is definitely the last approach that you want to take, because it does affect not only the company, but it affects people, right? And people, we all have feelings and emotions, and therefore it's a very tough decision all around. So needless to say, when we are asked about a layoff, we'll want to know exactly what have you done, not judgment, right? Because sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? I didn't think of that. Fabulous. Why don't you reach out? Let's plan on that first. Let's review that first. Let's see what can we avoid if you cut that, or make have a different approach. We also inquire about other things that may not be too operational, such as benefits. What are you offering? Are there opportunities to change those benefits? There's some required ones. There's some that are voluntary, right? So we want to make sure we ask all these questions. And so a lot of the time, we do bring some different ideas and approach what to look at before they automatically go to a layoff. However, right, finances are huge. So you definitely should be looking at your numbers. Whether, that is on a week-to-week type of basis, a monthly basis, quarterly, that financial aspect of your company should be something that you can talk through, right? What you're making, what your expenses are, and all of that, understanding how you're attaining your revenue, what your product is, and is there opportunities, right? Within your financial approach to your business, you can see where there may be some opportunity. And obviously, I hope that you also have budgets, right? So I've worked with many large organizations that are international, $1 billion, companies. And if you're that large, my goodness, you have a lot of data to look at, right? And so you're going to need a team to help you find out where is there going to be a layoff, right? Everything else has been exhausted. What are some of the opportunities? There's a big difference if you're a nonprofit, if you're a for-profit or private, right? Or if you have other folks within the board that are looking at your finances. But needless to say, you got to take a look at that first, understanding the numbers. Are the numbers correct? Are the budget that you had in mind correct? Are they reasonable? Not reasonable? Is there opportunity to make some of those changes or tweak it a little bit before you lay off? Again, layoff should not be the first question. But definitely, if there's got to be that question, there's different ways to approach a layoff, right? So numbers is huge. Start there and then inquire about where's my revenue coming from? Am I getting all of it? Where are my expenses? Can I cut down my expenses or any other fringe benefits before you move forward with a layoff approach?
Yeah. So I think what I hear you saying is that, and I think I agree with you, it's a good point that, right, before deciding that it's time for layoffs, large scale reduction in workforce, what have you, see if you can exhaust, right, as you mentioned, all other perhaps ways to save money, whether it's, as you mentioned, Vilma, recouping some unpaid invoices or accounts that are open or revenue that's perhaps due to the company not being received or collected, cutting other expenses, trimming the fat. Maybe if there are 3 offices that are leased or rented and half the workforce has gone remote in the last year and staying remote, maybe you can let go of that lease or something to that effect. So I definitely hear that. And I hear the reasons too. I think, you've got not only the moral, ethical, emotional reasons of the workers, but also the fact that the company, let's say they lay people off in large amounts, let's say they lose people, and then the company starts to do better, things turn around. Now you've got to look for, recruit, train, hire, rehire all new people, which can get very expensive. And of course, as I know as an employment lawyer, the more people that you lay off, the greater chance that you might encounter some either perhaps disgruntled or upset employees who might try to sue you, and some might have no ground to try to sue anyway, and some might actually have something that perhaps was mishandled that they'll now seek to capitalize on. So it's definitely, I think, all good points, and the type of data you mentioned to look at, right? Absolutely, the financials, making sure you're clear on your numbers. I think that's totally good. I'm wondering, so suppose the employer, right, say looks at all those numbers and they can't make sort of the ends meet, or they're still struggling, would that be when they know it's time to make certain cuts to their workforce? Is that when they say, okay, it's time for the reduction in force?
Generally after all those reviews have been done and they're still not making ends meet, or they know that if we continue this way, it's a for sure closure, right? Company closure.
Right.
Then the discussion on layoff or reduction in force should be discussed, right? And there's different ways to look at that. The main point that I usually try to convey to the clients is whatever decision you make, obviously take in consideration of the employees and make sure everybody's treated with respect and dignity through the whole process. And secondly, communication is the key. It's really huge. If most employees, a lot of employees know that maybe the company's it's been challenged. There's something going on with the company. There's some red flags here and there. Our employees are very, very smart. And thanks to the internet, they're very resourceful as well. So I think communication is also key. It should not be a surprise if that is the process that needs to be taking place, right? There should be discussion how well we're doing, not doing, and the opportunities to ensure we continue going forward. If the company is focusing in the revenue or the new service or making sure that expenses are being cut, I think that needs to be communicated. So there's reasons behind why companies do certain things, and I think that communication is essential. So now you decide that this is the last resource for us to consider, and it's a reduction of workforce. Most of the time, the number one reason employers want to reduce, they want to take an opportunity to let go of those individuals that are not performing really well.
Right.
Or they have an attitude, a personality conflict within the company. Okay. A lot of the times when I get that question, they want to do that reasoning behind laying off.
Yeah.
My question is like, I'm sure you do this too, documentation.
Yes.
Please tell me you've had plenty of documentation to
Right.
make decisions based on performance,
Right.
based on behavior.
100%.
Yeah, because to your point, it's not only are you taking consideration treating everybody with dignity and respect, but also I'm trying to look and ensure that the company mitigates the risk of any lawsuits
Yes.
because of these type of layoffs, right? And so when the companies tell me, well, we're not that good at that, then I said, then you don't use that method for laying people off, because the last thing we want is to have a claim and there's no supporting documentation or reasoning when the employer made that decision. So, but I get asked that question often. I think we want to let go of those that are not performing well. They have bad attendance or bad behavior. And when we ask about documentation, I say 80% of the time we get, well, we're not that good at that.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. And, right alongside you, because I do, as you know, litigation defense work for companies. I represent them in court, mediation, arbitration, what have you, against, say, defending them from employees, lawsuits, and claims, and also Department of Labor issues. But I also represent them in compliance and planning these type of situations. And I definitely see, Vilma, what you see, which is when there's a lack of documentation of, let's say, legitimate business reasons to let somebody go, coupled with a lack of respectful or termination or lack of communication, it's a recipe, right, for disaster. It's a recipe for the company going from needing me for their compliance and their drafting needs to needing me for the litigation defense. And I guess needing you as well to, say, gather documents for the attorney that might be step in, someone, let's say my equivalent in California, a California-based employment lawyer. But no, I think you raised some good points here, really worth unpacking. Like, number one, what I hear in that is I hear like what the employers should do, right? They should communicate well, like they should give notice of what's happening so people are not shocked by the layoffs. They should document the reasons for laying somebody off. So to me, it sounds like that's sort of the flip side of the question I was going to ask you about some of the common mistakes that you see companies make when enforcing layoffs. Or like, do you see, is it a lack of communication, right? Is it a poor documentation? Any other mistakes you could think of that companies make when they're, say, going through the layoff stages?
Communication.
Communication, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's like a fear of sharing so much information with your employees. But again, your employees are very smart.
Yeah.
And the internet makes them extremely resourceful. So they may know things that already that you don't want to share, but they already know of it, right? Yeah. So I think that being transparent with your employees, how the company is doing or not doing so well, it's okay. It's that communication piece that is very essential. And just to let them know we're working through it, right? We want to stay in business. It's okay to ask for their help too. I mean, they're loyal to you. We need your help. And it's that part of the communication that I think most of the time is missing.
I think you're right. I think, too often I think companies try to hide the fact that they're not doing well. They fear that people will either jump ship, which is ironic because, you let them go anyway. So, I mean, if they jump ship early, what's the difference, right? If anything, you're maybe not paying unemployment insurance if they resign voluntarily without any kind of constructive termination. But, to your point, Vilma, yeah, I think definitely keeping people in the loop, I think it also creates a sense of trust so that when the employer, let's say they do have to tell the employee, listen, I'm so sorry, but we really can't keep you. We had to make cuts across the board and your department got cut and you were one of the last people hired, that they believe you. If that's the reason, as opposed to just sort of thinking that like everything's hunky-dory and all of a sudden they get, word that they and 50 other people are laid off. It's sort of like, what's going on here? And so I think I think communication is very key. And I think that it's an excellent point you raised. And speaking of communicating with each other, and I received a message from the station, producer, it's time for our next commercial break. When we come back, I'll be speaking with Vilma about some specific techniques and methods that you can use when advising employees on like whom to lay off and when. And we'll talk more about Inside HR Consulting, how they can help you. So stay tuned to Employment Law Today right here on Talk Radio NYC. We will be right back.
Are you
passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, here tonight with our very insightful guest, Vilma Brager, co-founder, managing principal of Insight HR Consulting. I think the name fits, Vilma, I must say. And yeah, we're talking about this issue. For those joining us late in the show, Vilma and I are discussing the topic of helping employers, prepare for a recession. A tongue twister there. Helping employers prepare for recession. And we're talking about the legal liabilities, the financial factors and considerations that you as a business owner ought to take in mind regarding layoffs, reductions in force, that type of thing. So in the first half of the show, I think Vilma really covered it nicely. Some great ideas about when layoffs might be appropriate and what to try first. Talked about some of the common mistakes and missteps that companies make when implementing layoffs, perhaps failing to document, failing to communicate, failing to give notice and be transparent. All really, insightful stuff. And I have to say, Vilma, as an employment law attorney helping business owners and companies here in New York, I definitely see how those issues tend to be like across the board, from California to New York and industry-wide as well, that people, I think, need to hear the message of consistency, transparency, and communication.
Absolutely. 100% agree. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, layoffs are, like I said, we said earlier, should be the last resource, right? So other things that I wanted to mention too, before you even move forward for that, right? Take a look, maybe there could be a reduction of pay across the board. That might be helpful, right? Just things to keep in mind, if your salary, make sure it's at the minimum level that you're required to have a salary employee.
Gonna say that too, yes.
And make sure that you're paying the minimum wage wherever state or region you're in. But again, there's a lot of different ways you can take a look at to see if you have to do a reduction in force. Yeah. Because let me just tell you, I mean, I've experienced layoffs, meaning I have been providing communication that is coming and, communicated with the employees. It's a really tough situation to communicate in all parties, right? For the company to make that decision is harsh. Those that are delivering that communication is very difficult. And those that are receiving it too. So, when I said treat everybody with dignity, with respect, it's everybody, because it is a really rough and tough situation for a company to come across, right? But once again, you say, okay, we've done this, now pay attention, because this might affect you. If you're a large organization, laying people more than 50 employees at a time in an area and location, you got to apply the WARN Act, right? Yes. So we have federal WARN Act, but we also have some state mini WARN Acts. Like in California, New York has some a different definition of a WARN Act, right? Where
Yeah.
you are required to provide X amount of days and timelines to communicate of the layoff. If you're closing the facility, if you're
Right.
reducing your workforce by more than 50 employees or a percentage
Mhm.
or a large percentage of your organization.
Yeah.
So again, that requires you to meet regulation by contacting some state agency, letting them know that's
Mhm.
happening. And there's
Yep.
some timelines, right, that you are required to provide every employee. And so again, you got to take that in consideration. Sometimes, we may have a client that are going to lay off more than 50 or very
Yeah.
close to 50. And
Mhm.
we're like, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Have you communicated with the state agencies in regards to this is happening?
Right.
When do you want to do this? In 30 days, in 2 weeks? Well, that is
Yeah.
not going to happen. So
Yeah.
we try to educate the clients if that's the approach you're going to take. We see some liability, some risk on that process. So you got to be aware of them, right? And not every state have a different WARN Act, but quite a few, a handful. I want to say 6 or so.
Right.
So again, just pay attention to the WARN Act if you're going to lay off anybody more than 50 employees at a time.
Right. With the act, again, for those listening, right, as Vilma wisely stated, it requires that you give a certain amount of notice to employees when you have a mass layout to 50 or more, and there's certain conditions met in terms of the size of the company, I think the industry it's in, and then if failure to do so can result in civil penalties and damages the employees may seek, company may incur. So very important, Vilma, excellent point about, how important it is, I think, for a company not to rush into layoffs. But if they do have to do reductions in force, to make sure they're following all the rules, and you made a good point about look at the federal rules like the WARN Act, but also look at your corresponding states you're in. And I think it's especially important. I tell my clients now, you may be located in New York, you may have decided to go remote in 2020, 2021, and you told me you kept all your workers remote, which is all right, that's great. So now you have employees in Texas, Connecticut, Vermont, North Dakota, what have you. But make sure that you're in touch with, or those states' laws around notification, around, like, say, enforcement or not of a non-compete that you might have with that employee.
Right.
So I think very good points. And I think that, I think, reduction in pay is a great way to go also. And to your point also about, the sort of the damage that could be done from an overly, say, zealous or a poorly planned reduction in force. It not only harms the employees who are let go, but it can really impact the morale and the sense of security that the employees left behind feel, right? So often, like, say, they're missing, half their team, people whom they respected. So you may have cut 15% of your department, and the 85% that stayed, maybe half of those folks or a third of those folks are losing some of their mentors or some of their longtime colleagues and best friends, wondering if they're next down the line, looking at other positions maybe. So I think it's also always important to know that, we've kind of, I think you and I have been discussing on the show, the importance of sort of making sure the layoffs are the last resort.
Right.
And sometimes they're necessary, right? I mean, sometimes a company tries reduction in pay and they just need to do layoffs because if they don't, then the whole place closes and they have no one working there. So, but these are the challenging questions I think that the challenging questions that companies may be facing in 2023. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're all wrong about recession. I hope it's, doesn't come, or maybe it's quickly, resolved. But, I think that's all. Yeah.
I'm with you. And another thing to keep in mind, if you have made that decision, right? There are some companies that have a CBA, right? A collective bargaining agreement. A lot of the times that is described in your CBA if there is a reduction in force. So make sure you read that thoroughly as well, because if you have that in place, you have to adhere to it. But also, if you have a CBA in place, that communication is critical. If you're struggling as a company, reach out to your representative, have those discussions, because you never know. Nobody wants to lose employees. Nobody wants to lose revenue. And if you have a true partner in business, even if it's a union agency, they're there too, right? That will affect them as well. So is there something we can come, across, can we discuss and agreed upon to see if we can avoid that layoff, right? So having that conversation, you don't lose anything. As a matter of fact, you might gain a very great partner in the decision making, because they may have other solutions that you might not be thinking about. So again, if you do have a CBA, keep that in mind, read it very carefully, reach out to, to that agents and see if you can have a conversation regarding the struggles you're facing.
And for those that might not know, a CBA also is short for, as Vilma mentioned, collective bargaining agreement, right? It's the agreement often between, like, say, management and unions or certain unionized workers enforced absolutely. And you have to make sure that you as a company must follow the the agreed to provision, the conditions for layoffs. And that's to do with the timing, the notice, which people, which levels of positions of seniority or security can and can't be laid off. So it's actually a nice segue into my next question for you, Vilma, which is, what are some of the specific techniques, and you've alluded to some of these already, and the specific techniques and methods that you use when your company, Insight HR Consulting, when you are advising employers on like which people to lay off or like how to notify them? Are there any tips you give in addition to what you've been talking about so far?
Right. Well, ideally, face to face, right? That's
100%.
part of showing somebody respect and dignity is having those conversations. They're tough conversations, don't get me wrong. But your employees were loyal, however long they were there with you, they were working for you. Giving in-person communication in regards to the situation it would be ideal. Now, it really depends, right? So every company is a little bit different. Just like every investigation is a little different. They may have similarities, but they're not. So are you laying off, 20 employees versus 200? So the approach may be a little bit different, right? If you're having a planned closure, what does that look like? Again, keep in mind of all the items that we talked about. But needless to say, based on your situation, your particulars, there's different ways to approach that, but ideally in person. And now you also mentioned something very new to our work environment, remote employees. How do you communicate with your remote employees, right? So again, any way you can approach your employee directly would be the best way to have that communication, because it's a very tough communication to have. And employees, give them some respect to take it in, to be a little bit emotional, because it's an emotional situation too. And time for them to ask questions, right? Maybe follow-up questions. Maybe a welfare follow-up call will be, useful too. So there, again, every situation is a little bit different, but at a minimum, try to do it in person, one-on-one. If you're going to have, 20, perhaps 20 of them should be done the same day, but one-on-one. Maybe you can't do it alone. Maybe you need to bring in other leaders to communicate that. Give them training. Give those leaders some training how to communicate this news, right?
100%. If I can add to that, Vilma, something I see as an employment law attorney, it's like 100% with you. I think face-to-face is always ideal as opposed to a phone call or an email. It's very impersonal, right? And I think making sure that you're clear, answering questions. I like what you said about sort of scheduling, I'll paraphrase a bit, right? A follow-up with them. And I often also would tell the employer, what might you potentially be offering the person? Know in advance. Are you offering them severance? If so, how much, right? Are you saying, are there conditions attached to that severance? Do you have a severance agreement, which includes release of claims that you can give to them to sign? Has that agreement been looked at by an attorney, employment law attorney, in the last 6 months or a year? Because the law is always changing about what you can and can't put in those releases of agreements about arbitrations or no arbitration clause. So I think that's all excellent points. And, I've had too many clients who they hire, let's say, to handle sensitive termination. And much like yourself, I lay out the whole process and then something happens. And in the heat of the moment, they say, you know what, you're fired, go home. And they say it in front of other employees and they don't give them a chance to respond. They don't have anything planned out. And it becomes very heated. They tell their coworkers, their customers, and the person gets enraged, goes home, stews about it, tries to connect to something else that happened, which wasn't the cause from 6 months ago, and they hired an attorney. And so I think you're really laying out some helpful advice that our listeners can really take to heart in order to reduce the chance of litigation, disgruntled employees, of even just bad press, right? Bad reviews of the company, all of which is great stuff. And I think you have, I'm sure, definitely more to say at this point, but we have to take our next commercial break. But when we come back, we'll talk more with Vilma Brager from Insight HR Consulting Clearly, she knows her stuff. So if you're a company out there with HR needs, reach out to her. But stick around for now. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law attorney here in New York State, representing companies, management, industry agnostic. Here tonight with a very similar colleague, Vilma Brager is an HR, professional HR consultant, very knowledgeable in this field, and she is the co-founder and the managing principal of Insight HR Consulting, located in California. So Vilma, wow, time flies when you're having fun, I must say, because you and I talk about this. We can talk about this for hours if we had no time limit on the topic. But I wanted to ask you, you gave us so much good information about when RIFs might be appropriate, when not, and what kind of mistakes companies make and how they can correctly communicate for the best outcome for RIFs or for reduction in force or layoffs. So I really appreciate that. I think this is all very helpful information for companies as they approach potentially a recession. I guess my last question for you is, in what ways do you and your company, Insight HR Consulting, how do you differ from other HR consulting firms? Like maybe perhaps you might have an anecdote or two about how you helped a client company. Names, of course, need not be stated for protection of confidentiality, but the floor, I'm curious about that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. The one common reason why, we get quite a lot of referrals, and that is a huge compliment, right? But I think we really are, what they see us as a really trusted advisor. We want the best outcome for them, the business owner, the company, and employees. It can't happen. It is a lot of work, a lot of discussions, but it can occur. And so I think with our consultants are really forthcoming in notifying business owners what are some of the best practices and what are some of those risky approaches they're considering. And we let them know, hey, that is definitely going to get you in some litigated situation, right? But we're not also there to be their police, right? We're not there to point the finger. We really want the best outcome for the company, the business owner, and their employees. And so our focus and approach is always bring solutions that an employer can consider to avoid litigation and to ensure the process of the company is going in the right direction. And so I think really being a trusted advisor sets us apart from many consulting firms. And also because we're not just a one consultant type of person. We have a handful of HR consultants who have been in the industry for more than 20 years. if not very close to 20 years. And most of us have been that generalist HR professional through our career. So we know just about everything there is under the HR umbrella. And again, we're very resourceful. Our resources are their resources. Again, it's the same approach. We want them to be successful. And if we have resources that can make that happen, or opportunities where they can do a different approach or different guidance, and our resources are theirs. So attorneys, absolutely, benefit brokers or brokers, insurance brokers, you name it. We are happy to extend our family to yours, right? So that's our approach. We have a business acumen as well. Many of us have partnered with business owners for many years, have worked in multi-state, even multinational companies. And like I said, we've all been generalists for most of our career. So we have that expertise. If you need guidance in compensation or benefits, employee relations, training and development, we can definitely offer solutions for them.
Right. So I hear basically a broad array of services and a whole journalist background and multiple people with experience. I hear that. I hear you talking about bringing a solution. I also love what you said about wanting what's best for the company, the employer, and the employees. And I think that more and more I'm seeing a trend in HR and in the industry, whereas like people are seeing that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not an either or, right? It's not either the employer comes out on top or the employee does. It's actually like a both and, that you can actually have solutions that benefit the employer and the employee, and the company wins when the employee wins, right? Unless there's a litigation, employee suing employer, in which case doesn't apply, but that's when I come in. But I actually I find that like companies that businesses that use good HR help, such as your company, there's a strong chance that they won't need me to litigate for them, and I'd rather have that. I'd rather work with the company on following the laws and getting compliance and writing employment contracts for them and negotiating. So I love what you do. I think it's great. I'm always a big fan of HR consultants that have a broad vision, and it sounds like you're sharing that with us tonight. So really want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure being here today. I've always been a person that loves to share. If I am able to help, all you got to do is ask. I've been trying to read minds for the last 30 years, and I haven't been able to. So I'm always somebody that you just got to ask. And if I know of something or a resource for you, or even give you a recommendation, I'm very open to that. So, I think, and that really pretty much our whole team feels that way. Again, we really want organizations as a whole being, be able to survive a recession, survive state regulations that you're in. We truly believe in our economy. We wanted to have a very strong economy. And if we can partner and help out, absolutely. Although I'm based out of California, believe it or not, we do have clients in other states, in the East Coast, Midwest. We're very well versed in different states. Most of the states have their own regulations. So being a certified professional kind of gives you that exposure to understand that. And so many of us are certified as well. We're bilingual, as you can tell. I am a Spanish speaker. English is my second language. So I get sought after because of the Spanish language, right? I do train in Spanish. We do quite a lot of information in Spanish as well. So that has been very helpful.
Wow. The bilingual approach, definitely, I think, another asset that comes in handy, especially when companies may have employees who speak English is not their first language, or they need to communicate. So good to have that, knowledge as well, what you guys do. At this point, often I'd like to turn the floor over to you as my guest and say, hey, tell us, like 2 minutes, the floor is yours, about how do people reach you, your website, your email, any kind of upcoming books you have or seminars. The floor is yours for 2 minutes. Oh, you.
Oh, you're awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
So we do have a website. Our website is insidehrconsulting.com. You are more than welcome to email me at vilma@insidehrconsulting.com. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Being part of the board of Inland Empire SHRM, we have an upcoming October in-person conference. If you're in California, you're more than welcome to attend. We're going to have a lot of information. But inside HR consulting, we really offer quite a lot of solutions for businesses. We're not a cookie cutter type of consulting firm. We believe that we can come up with a solution for your concern or the reason why you're reaching out to us. And so we put that into play with everything that we do, from employee relations to leadership development. We do disc assessments. We also do quite a lot of coaching for supervisory and mid-manager level roles within Inside Consulting. If you need somebody to assess your platforms, benefits, payroll, we're happy to do that for you. We try to provide solutions to your HR needs, anything to do with the human capital of your world, right? And please know that with our experience and education and certification, we can come up with that solution.
Right. Wow, I hear that. Interesting. I got to say that, and people that might want to look you up on LinkedIn, it's Vilma, Vilma Brager, in case you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Well, Vilma, I have to say, I really want to thank you so much for your excellent, just your input tonight, this conversation. You've been listening to Employment Law Today out there, folks, and you're maybe perhaps you're watching Vilma Brager from Inside HR Consulting and I are just discussing just preparing for recession. So if you like the show, if you like what you've seen and heard tonight, if you enjoy tuning in to Talk Radio NYC Tuesday nights at 5 p.m., tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your clients, tell your family to tune in to Talk Radio NYC, or tune in to, as I mentioned, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and Amazon to listen to new episodes of Employment Law Today. Once again, I'm your host, Eric Sarver. Stick around. We have some great shows coming up. I want to thank you sincerely, Vilma Brager, for your insight and for Inside HR Consulting. And with that, I just want to wish you and our audience, our listeners, and everybody out there a great night and a great week. And once again, Vilma, I truly thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and everybody. Have a great evening.
Have a great evening.